Hello, everyone. Welcome to Read the Right Thing. I'm Eric, and today we're going to be talking about the book Calypso by David Sedaris. So I've read two other books by David Sedaris. I've read Chipmunk Seeks Squirrel, and also Dress Your Family in Corduroy and Denim. Now, it's kind of funny how I found out about this author. It was actually through one of the guys who works at Barstool Sports. I think I was listening to a podcast or watching a video, and he was talking about reading this book and how funny it was. Up until that point, I don't think I'd ever heard of David Sedaris, which is kind of embarrassing because I pride myself on reading lots of books, but I hadn't read any David Sedaris. So I read these two books throughout the years, and they both made me laugh. They're both hilarious. The other book I've been reading, but I haven't finished yet, is Theft by Finding, which is excerpts from his journal and diary throughout the years. So reading a David Sedaris book is sure to bring lots of laughs. I admire the way he finds humor in everyday situations and at his willingness to share personal stories. He's not afraid to share stories or thoughts that many people would suppress, deep down, lock up, and throw away the key. The type of thing you remember 3 years later in the shower and tremble from embarrassment, that's the type of stuff David Sedaris writes about. From his website, Calypso is described as the following. If you've ever laughed your way through David Sedaris' cheerful, misanthropic stories, you might think you know what you're getting with Calypso. You'd be wrong. When he buys a beach house on the Carolina coast, Sedaris envisions long, relaxing vacations spent playing board games and lounging in the sun with those he loves most. And life at the C-section, as he names the vacation home, is exactly as idyllic as he imagined. Except for one tiny, vexing realization. It's impossible to take a vacation from yourself. The 21 short stories in Calypso are funny, especially when imagining David Sedaris reading them in his voice. Before I read the book, I went to a book signing at my local independent bookstore, and I wasn't able to see the reading because tickets were sold out. But I showed up after to get a book signed anyway. I was towards the back of the line, and the line was crawling. It was not moving at all. And it was basically stopped for an hour and a half. The line moved slowly, and when I finally got towards the front where David Sedaris was sitting, I could see why the line was moving so slowly. He was having weird, if not genuine, conversations with each and every person in the line. He asked nurses if they had ever encountered patients who stuck things up their asses. He made jokes, and he talked about walking around Salt Lake City and also getting robbed in the previous city where he was reading. It's his observations that make him stand out from most writers and most people. It is clear he loathes small talk, so he asks crazy, outrageous questions to make small talk more bearable and entertaining. There's a quote from the AV Club about this book that said, David Sedaris' biggest strength as an essayist and humorist lies in his remarkable power of observation, of detecting the humor and pathos in the everyday conversations most of us don't register. His attention and wit are as incisive as ever, but Sedaris brings a stronger sense of self to the pages of Calypso. It's both warmer and bleaker than any Sedaris that has come before. Now, I haven't read all of his books, but I have to agree with that quote. Throughout the book, this bleakness portrays itself in that he talks about, family members getting old, family members passing away. And also there's a part I want to read that has the bleakness while also that trademark humor of this author. The part I'm going to read is about when he has a lump on his rib cage. And it's not cancerous, but still, most people would take a lump very seriously, and, that's not something they would probably want to joke about. But how he talks about it is just so strange and funny. So he says this: the dermatologist was fun to talk to, as was a nurse who gave me a flu shot while I was passing through O'Hare. The only exception I've had so far is a surgeon I saw on the coast of North Carolina a few days after having my physical. 6 years earlier, I had noticed a lump on my right side, just at the base of my rib cage. It was, I later learned, a lipoma, meaning a harmless fatty tumor. It continued to grow for the next several months until it was the size and feel of an unshelled, hard-boiled egg. I could have lived with it for the rest of my life, but after spending some time along the canals not far from our beach house, I got a better idea. The surgeon I met with didn't have much in the way of a personality. That's not to say he was rude, just perfunctory. He took an ultrasound of my fatty tumor and said that he could remove it the following week. Terrific, I said, because I want to feed it to a snapping turtle. Excuse me? Not just any snapping turtle, I continued, as if that was what had given him pause. There's one very specific turtle I'm planning to feed it to. He has a big growth on his head. It's against federal law for me to give you anything I remove from your body, the surgeon said. But it's my tumor, I reminded him. I made it. It's against federal law for me to give you anything I've removed from your body. Well, could I maybe have half to feed to this turtle? It's against federal law for me to give you anything I've removed from your body. I left with my tumor intact, thinking, honestly, what has this country come to? So that's the type of writing that you get with this author. You know, it's everyday situations where most people probably wouldn't find the humor or something to write about seeing a dermatologist, but yet whether it's his own personality or just luck, he seems to always have these funny encounters with people. And like that quote said, it's really his observations. Most people, they wouldn't even make these kinds of observations. You know, they wouldn't even think to see a snapping turtle with a growth on his head and even think that, oh, I should get this tumor removed and feed it to this snapping turtle. Now, I haven't read all of his books, but I have to agree with that quote. You know, it is warm, but also bleak. When I was in the line and I walked up to him and said hello, he began drawing with different colored Sharpies. I couldn't see what he was drawing, but while he was drawing, he asked me different questions like he was asking the other guests. Two of the questions I remember are, when was the last time you saw your mother? I replied that it had been a few days, but I'd actually just spoken to her a couple hours before. A few moments later, another question he asked was, are you an abortionist? When he returned the book, I saw that he'd been drawing this. A hairy arm with a extended middle finger next to his signature. I laughed, and it's exactly the type of autograph I would want from David Sedaris. Calypso, the book is funny, but also more full of sorrow and reflection than the other two books that I read. There's a quote from the Tampa Bay Times review that says, Calypso is the most family-centered of his books yet, and although much of it is very funny, it's also his most melancholy as it addresses aging and loss. It ranges across a number of other subjects as well, often with Sedaris' trademark off-center, self-deprecating humor. The type of loss he talks about is losing family members. So the second short story is called Now We Are Five, and I want to read just the first section of that with you. In late May 2013, a few weeks shy of her 50th birthday, my younger sister, Tiffany, committed suicide. She was living in a room in a beat-up house on the hard end of Somerville, Massachusetts, and had been dead, the coroner guessed, for at least 5 days before her door was battered down. I was given the news over a white courtesy phone while at the Dallas airport. Then, because my plane to Baton Rouge was boarding, and I wasn't sure what else to do, I got on it. The following morning, I boarded another plane, this one to Atlanta, and the day after that, I flew to Nashville, thinking all the while about my ever-shrinking family. A person expects his parents to die, but a sibling? I felt I'd lost the identity I'd enjoyed since 1968, when my brother was born. 6 kids, people would say. How do your poor folks manage? There were a lot of big families in the neighborhood I grew up in. Every other house was a fiefdom. so I never gave it much thought until I became an adult and my friends started having children. 1 or 2 seemed reasonable, but anything beyond that struck me as outrageous. A couple Hugh and I knew in Normandy would occasionally come to dinner with their wrecking crew of 3, and when they'd leave several hours later, every last part of me would feel violated. Take those kids, double them, and subtract the cable TV, that's what my parents had to deal with. Now, though, there weren't 6, only 5. And you can't really say there used to be 6. I told my sister Lisa, it just makes people uncomfortable. I recalled a father and his son I'd met in California a few years back. So there are other children? I asked. There are, the man said. 3 who are living, and a daughter, Chloe, who died before she was born, 18 years ago. That's not fair, I remember thinking. Because, what's a person supposed to do with that? I also read another quote, and I can't remember who to attribute it to, but they said, this book is beach reading for people who hate the beach. In this book, he writes about, his relationships with his siblings, how that's changed throughout the years from when they were kids to now when they are adults, and in some ways how it doesn't change. It's funny with your siblings, they're the one people your whole life. So you knew them when they were, in some cases, when they were born or when they were 4 or 5 years old to now when they're adults. Sedaris also talks about the relationship he has with his own father, and now that his dad is becoming very old. And that really made me think about, my relationships with my parents and grandparents and how that evolves and changes, but also just stays the same no matter how old we get. And I thought this book was very well done. It made me laugh. It made me reflect on life. Made me reflect on family relationships and how we treat each other. David Sedaris is sure to make you laugh. It's sure to entertain you. So I would definitely recommend it.